The wind picked up in the middle of Puget Sound, Washington State. Waves more than 3 meters high, crashing repeatedly against the rows of giant steel cages under the water. Hundreds of fishermen and engineers struggled amid the howling wind and creaking metal. A deep, thunderous explosion echoed from beneath the water. 260,000 salmon, weighing thousands of tons, rushed out of the cages, spreading out like a living waterfall, a terrifying sight. But little did any of them know that moment would set in motion a $1 billion ecological disaster, one that would haunt the entire American Northwest for years to come. It's not a gift, it's an invasion, because these fish don't belong in the Pacific Ocean. Granddiscover, Washington salmon, invasion, 260,000 escaped fish, spark a $1 billion ecological disaster. On the afternoon of August 19, 2017, unusual winds rose over the Puget Sound, Washington. Pressure dropped suddenly. Waves were 3 meters high, and wind gusts reached 80 kilometers per hour. One main anchor line broke, a second line. Within minutes, the entire structure was heavier. 100 tons began to tilt, then collapsed into the water like a giant steel building collapsing. During the storm, the system continued to operate, as the harvest worth tens of millions of dollars was just days away. Then, a cracking sound rang out, as if tearing the surface of the sea apart. One main anchor line broke, a second line. Within minutes, the entire structure was heavier. 100 tons began to tilt, then collapsed into the water like a giant steel building collapsing. Hundreds of thousands of Atlantic salmon trapped for months now rush out to sea. They panic, swim instinctively, creating a biological storm. Cat dawned on, the scene appeared like a battlefield. Broken cage, floating buoy, and about 260,000 Atlantic salmon have disappeared, flowing into Puget Sound. From the map, the escape site is right at the gateway to the Pacific Ocean, meaning the school could spread hundreds of miles in just a few days. Washington state agencies immediately declared ecological emergency. The radio system repeatedly transmitted the message, "Catch as many as you can. Don't let them get into the river." Local fishermen recounted, "The fish were everywhere, the nets were heavy in just 1 hour. We thought we had struck gold. Never before had there been so many salmon." But joy quickly turned to worry. They did not belong in this sea. In the following days, a force of fishermen, biologists, and volunteers poured into the sea to fish day and night. But the ocean is vast beyond any human plan. After just 1 week, the first Atlantic salmon were spotted in 13 different rivers, stretching from Washington State all the way to British Columbia, Canada. We pulled up the nets, and we couldn't tell which fish were native and which were exotic. They were all mixed together, a fisherman shared anxiously. Where the cage collapsed, the steel frames were twisted like paper, mixed with thousands of fish carcasses stuck in the torn net. The seawater was murky with fish fat, and a series of seabirds flocked in, creating a rare chaotic scene. The press called it the silver rain of Puget Sound. But just days later, the media changed its tune. The silver rain turns toxic because farmed salmon often carry parasites, ISA viruses, which can infect native fish. The final and most frightening risk: genetic hybridization. If farmed salmon interbreed with native fish, the weaker genes will blend into wild populations, losing thousands of years of evolutionary strength. It's an irreversible threat. These silent invaders make no noise, leave no immediate trace. But swarms are lurking deep into the Pacific Ocean currents, casting an uncertain future for the entire ecosystem along America's coast. While the ecological threat worries scientists, the economic impact has shaken the aquaculture industry. A single escaped fish can cost millions of dollars right away, but it can also trigger a domino effect that ripples across the market. shore, the media exploded. Who was responsible? How could a multi-billion-dollar system collapse in minutes? Cook Aquaculture was silent for the first 48 hours, then announced that the cause was abnormal tides during a solar eclipse. That explanation only fueled public outrage. Meanwhile, out at sea, hundreds of fishermen continue to fish, not for profit, but to save the ecosystem they depend on. That explanation only fueled public outrage. Meanwhile, out at sea, hundreds of fishermen continue to fish, not for profit, but to save the ecosystem they depend on. If a hurricane can blow hundreds of thousands of fish out to sea, what happens when climate change makes hurricanes more intense? Warns an expert from the University of Washington. Conservation groups are raising the question of responsibility. Who will pay if native salmon disappear? If ecosystems are disrupted? The economic damage has reached hundreds of millions of dollars, but the ecological damage cannot be measured in dollars. And for coastal residents, the biggest worry is not the fish they've caught, but the hundreds of thousands still floating out there, silently casting an uncertain future for the ocean. The remaining question that makes everyone shudder, is this just an incident or a warning bell for the entire global seafood industry? In the vast ocean, the escaped fish are now just drifting shadows. But their legacy is not over. Can nature balance itself? Or will humans pay the price for an irreversible mistake? And the final question for all of us, is this just a local disaster or a harbinger of larger crises ahead?